that haven't met me, I'm Nancy Phillips. I'm the program coordinator for the Illinois Family Resource Center. And we've been around starting next month on the 1st. We will be 9 years in, and this was going to be a pilot project of a year or so, but it has been so successful and we have grown, and I've been able to add staff. You see Zach on here, he's the administrative assistant, and you will be getting a lot of stuff from him now that you're on this webinar. We send out newsletters to people that have been on. We send out more information and updates. And I'm sure that you will be seeing more and more of him because we're passing more stuff on to him to do, which is exciting. We also have a education coordinator up in the Cook County, Collier County areas, and she's doing a lot of stuff in Spanish for us, as well as just doing outreach and working with the communities up there. So I'm just going to go through a brief overview of the Resource Center because I've got so much information to share. I've been in this field over 40 years in one role or another. I've worked statewide at the prevention level. I've worked in our area, which is Central Illinois, for what used to be known as Central East Alcoholism and Drug Council, now goes by Our House, for many different roles over the years. And they hold the state contract for the Illinois Family Resource Center, which is a statewide program. And I want to share with you just a little bit about what this is. There's my email address if you need to get a hold of me, and the phone numbers to reach me. The bottom one is in the office. I'm seldom there. Usually the best way to catch me is email or on the cell. And there is illinoisfamilyresources.org is our website, which we just keep growing and adding to. And just briefly, for those of you that are new or may not have been in any of the presentations before, our goal, and we are funded to provide information and support by the Illinois Department of Human Services through the Division of Substance Use Prevention and Recovery, better known as SUPER. I've been in this field long enough to have gone through several different titles for that department. The last one was DASA and probably was there a lot longer than some of the others, so you may recognize that. And what we do is we address issues around substance use disorder, mental health issues, gambling disorder. And our role is not to do direct service. We can help you find that service if you need it. We can make resources available to you. But that is not our role anymore, although I have done that. In the past, I oversaw outpatient services that had 8 programs under it. So I come with some of that information of actually working with the people. I supervised what used to be the DCFS DASA contract for this region. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you today is some of what I learned through that experience. We provide information to human service providers, to parents, significant others, Ross councils, communities. It's available to anybody, anyone that wants information around the issues of substance use disorder, mental health, gambling, especially as it impacts families. And that family is by whatever your definition is. We're here to help, and that's what we provide lots of information on. We do that through website postings. That's done on a regular basis. And on those website postings, we have links for upcoming webinars, which we do. And this year we've grown to where we're doing usually two a month. And some of those are in Spanish. So that's a good resource for you to be aware of. The website postings also, we post videos, we post information in a lot of different areas, for kinship care, specifically for families, for youth and teens, for providers and professional people. We post resources there too. So take a look at the website. Facebook page, for the most part, Zach is the one that does the posting on there, and he does a great job of just what's going on and what's out there, what's current resources. There's usually more than one posting a day, so link onto our Facebook page. I just shared that we do webinars, and we are offering them and will grow this next fiscal year and doing even more in Spanish. I know that Christina, who is our coordinator that does the Spanish, is on here. I'll have to link her in next time. I didn't think about that. We do technical assistance and facilitation if you're wanting to do some planning, if you're trying to figure out what's going on. I've done a lot of work with the Ross councils. I was in from the very beginning, planning stages. Well, it's been almost 7 years ago when Ross was being formed, and that I went in with the role of we can't forget the families. The families are a very important part of our systems of care that we have to look at, with the belief that families that are healthy or healthier can support those people that they care about and that are important to them in their recovery journey. And the communities. With Ross Councils, we've expanded to where we're really looking at how do we create and have those wonderful relationships that support recovery in our communities, and that communities themselves can be on a recovery journey. We can do individualized in-service presentations. Any of the webinars we do, if there's a group or a provider that says, I really like that information, but I need a little more specific on this area of it, get a hold of us and we can do that either in person or on Zoom. We do lots of conferences and exhibits. We've got a big one, the Illinois Certification Board's coming up, and we will be there with exhibit tables. I will be doing a workshop there. Usually some staff person is also participating in a workshop. Read lots of research information and be aware that we do have Spanish services available. Okay, I wanted to look at the time because I've done my advertisement. I want to move into the topic. I want to share with you one reason that I think this topic's important, looking at parenting in early recovery. When I was supervising the DCFS DASA contract for our area, and that meant we had referrals and we would either refer them out or provide them within the Our House services, which is pretty broad. I learned a lot about those struggles that parents had. It's not, when you address this, people have a tendency to say, well, it's the females, they're the primary person providing care to their children, et cetera. And that's true. But we dealt with lots of fathers and the issues that they had early in recovery of being a good parent and a strong parent. And this is a passion of mine because it's no secret. My family knows I talk about them. My father was alcoholic, so I am the child of. My husband has over 40 years of recovery, and I always say, folks, recovery is possible. It works. We're living proof of that. I have a son that's got, I would say, probably 12 years or a little more, and he's a really good parent. He came out of that with some strong skills. I have a granddaughter that has experienced substance use issues, misuse issues, and we have also been in the position to have guardianship of not only our granddaughters due to mental health issues primarily, and then great-grandchildren. So I'm bringing with this not only professional experience from having worked in the field and supervised and worked with those types of services, but my own experience. I am impacted from many of those. So we're going to look at those issues related to the impact of the parents' use, discover barriers for healthy parenting, and I really want to spend a little bit of time on that. This is just an overview. In an hour's time, I can't do any more than that. I would love to, at some point in time, make this a two-part presentation, and maybe that'll be for next year because there's more to put in here than what you will get today. But I want to trigger you thinking a little differently about how you look and how you experience your interaction with parents that are new on their recovery journey. So we'll just kind of explore the extended family and the community and how that works in positive parenting. So we know in the United States, over 8 million children have at least one parent that's experiencing substance use disorder or substance misuse. There's a lot of controversy on what terminology to use, um, because SUD sounds, quite honestly, SUD sounds a little funny to me. We know 1 in 4 children live in families with a parent or a caregiver suffering from a substance use disorder, and these are so often the first people that really get the impact of that, and often the last helped. And you can't talk about a parent being in early recovery without taking a look at it from the viewpoint of the children involved, from those little teeny tiny littles up through teenagers. And one of the most important things, and I had to really internalize this the longer I worked in the field, but one of the most important things to remember is that parents struggling with drugs and or alcohol being a drug, they're not bad parents. They care about their children, and often in ways that we don't understand. And there's some good examples of that, but I think that we'll just move on rather than going through that. When I saw this, I thought, oh, this is a good fit for what I saw of a lot of the parents that went through the outpatient services when I was supervising. I'm not perfect, but I try to do my best for my kids. And I believe that under the circumstances, with what's going on with their body, psychologically, physiologically, they're trying to do the best for their kids, but the substance use disorder and mental health often gets in the way. Some days are hard. I struggle with my own demons, but I make it through because I want them to be happy and I know how much they are loved. I believe that most of our parents really, truly are doing the best they can at that point in time. We know children impacted by a caregiver that is misusing substances is more at a risk for lifelong negative mental and physical health consequences, 3 times more likely to be physically, emotionally, or sexually abused, and 4 times more likely to be emotionally or physically neglected. And the rates are higher in rural populations. That's often because the resources to support change aren't there. Our rural areas in Illinois are suffering in many ways. And as you notice, my voice is getting kind of gruff. I apologize, but I have been on more meetings and talking about some plans and things lately that I think my voice is about gone. We know children are more likely to be involved with child welfare, more likely to lack self-awareness, experience anxiety, depression, confusion, and anger, and this all leads to trauma. This is part of what trauma is that our younger population is experiencing. We know that mental health issues and for depending on the ages, substance misuse has increased, especially coming out of the pandemic. It is a real concern. This all fits in with what we're talking about today. They experience unexcused absences from school and often drop out early, have difficulty with direct communication, are less likely to set healthy boundaries for themselves. If they haven't seen it modeled, how do they know how to set those boundaries? We know they're more likely to see and hear more fighting, witness more crime, suffer from poverty, lose more stable relationships with caring adults, and those caring adults are so important. And that trauma can last a lifetime unless we help take care of it, unless we provide an environment that helps support them through that, and the parents that love them that are on their recovery journey. I put this in here just briefly to realize that one of the issues we have with parents on their recovery journey is having the skills to take the role of parenting a child that had neonatal substance exposure, or carrying the guilt of what may have happened due to their use, or both. And I think as we look at how do we support those families that we work with, that are in our community, that are in our church and spiritual environment, how do we do that without looking at all these things? And this is a condition we know that affects newborns who receive addictive substances through the placenta during pregnancy. Most of these littles will result in a withdrawal after birth, and most of them end up in a NICU unit. I've got a great grandchild that did for 7 weeks, and I watched what happened in that. And this is often what they look like. Thank goodness she is an absolute blessing and is doing very well at 1.5 years. So recovery is possible for all of us, but it's not an easy road. We know that the children are often removed due to intervention from children's services, from parents being incarcerated, being hospitalized, overdose, or death. And too often, our children have to take on the role of caregiver for the family. I can kind of remember looking after my sister when my dad would come home under the influence, those things. He was a very highly functioning alcoholic, or a person that experienced alcoholism. At the same time, on his personal side, his job was incredible, but on the personal side, it was rough. The impact of abuse and neglect on the children's brains creates a stretch beyond childhood into adulthood. This came from some information as I was looking at things around parenting in early recovery. Possible impact includes impaired cognitive development, and we know that definitely can be kind of a hidden fact when children are prenatally exposed. You may think that things are fine until they hit the schools, and some of those important learning skills, cognitive development isn't quite as refined, and often then they're misdiagnosed as ADD, ADHD, several other things when that's not the real issue. Inhibited executive function skills and a weakened immune system. So what are the issues of healthy parenting as the recovery journey develops? We're going to talk a little bit about that, and what are some of the support resources to consider. I want to keep track of the time here so we can get through it. Yes, I was being kind of sarcastic when I put the kitty's paws on here, but I think it's important that as parents new to recovery and in a recovery journey, can be experiencing pause and halt. Pause is post-acute withdrawal syndrome. We don't hear as much about these issues as we used to when you're at trainings and things, and I think this is something we're missing. This old lady says pause hasn't gone away just because we've gone a few more years down the road. We see post-acute withdrawal syndrome, which can mean that the brain's racing or you're just not functioning. Almost those two opposites, and it can flip from day to day. Oftentimes those using dreams happen as part of post-acute withdrawal. It's a complicated process, and it can last for up to 2 years before the brain really starts to heal and function better. So to not think about that as being part of the issues that we may see in parents new on a recovery journey, especially if they're struggling, we need to revisit that. And then the other thing of halt: hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Early in recovery, that's not uncommon. And oftentimes there's so many other pressures going on, especially if you're resuming your parenting role, that you get caught up in that. So as we support our parents, just keep this in mind and consider how it may impact those early times. Parenting role in recovery, in a couple of the resources that I kind of looked at, and I pulled things together from several different things. It's the ability to plan and prioritize. When you're coming out of residential, or if you're in outpatient services, or if your recovery is based on community support and self-help groups, the ability to plan and prioritize is often difficult. Innovation and creative thinking is often shut down because that wasn't something that was real active when you were using it. It's something that has to start again and be built up, but it's very important in that parenting role. Negotiation. Being able to appropriately negotiate is a skill a new parent needs, especially if the child's been removed through the child welfare system, you're involved in the courts, and/or kinship caregivers, if that child's been placed with someone else and now you're ready to resume that role back. Being a quick learner and adapting to new information is very important, and that's hard for all of us, let alone someone whose brain is healing. and starting to take those steps, and good communication skills so you can state appropriately to your child what you need, what you expect, how you feel. It's not only good communication skills with your child that you can role model, but it's with the people that you're working with to build that good recovery. If you have any comments, stick it in the chat and I will try and check it here pretty soon and see if there's something that you need. Can you access that, Zach?
I can see it, but I can't answer it. Christina is able to answer.
Okay, well, you can always interrupt me and throw something out too if you need to. Thanks,
Will do.
Christina. I appreciate that. The developmental role is we need to be able to help our children in that early recovery with their cognitive development that's age appropriate. And for new parents that are early in recovery, or not new parents, for parents that are new in their recovery, oftentimes their use alone started them before they really fully reached the cognitive development that is their potential. The socio-cultural development, physical development, mental development, and spiritual development. These are all things that are important for new parents in recovery, or parents new in recovery. It's been a busy month already, folks. I've put just a few pieces in here throughout that I think are good resources for you. The Addiction Monster, it's a really neat book to work with children. Often for children, grief is lost in the development process, especially if they've been removed from their parent for a while or if they've been exposed to trauma through the parent's use. We forget as professionals and as community people oftentimes that we need to look at that grief. Grief is a natural reaction to loss, and that loss we talked about earlier can be for many reasons, and that link to their parents can be for many reasons. And we don't realize why we're grieving or why they're grieving. So let's return to that and remember that. Another thing that I have found in the last few years that I think is worth addressing is relocation stress syndrome. I found this as I was doing some work on kinship care and grandparents raising grandchildren, because I've done a lot of training on that, considering that I am one, and I know there are people that are part of this afternoon that are in that same role. Relocation stress syndrome is it can be physical or psychological. It's a disturbance from transfer from one place to another. If a child's removed from their parent and they're transferred to foster care, to kinship care, to the neighbor for a while, that is disturbance. It's trauma, if we want to name it appropriately. And a move often is just the beginning, and the move may be, in some circumstances, they're removed from the parents' care, and in order to have kinship care somewhere, which is a preference, children are better off in kinship care in the long term than foster care, even when the foster care is very strong and very good. Oftentimes, if it's going to be long term, being linked with that kin, whether it's a grandparent or an aunt or somebody else, is very important. And the move may be a geographic move. So really, we could say relocation stress syndrome is physical, psychological, or geographical. And it kicks off a grief process for both the parents and the children. To make a difference in someone's life, you don't have to be brilliant, rich, beautiful, or perfect. You just have to care. And we know that our littles coming into care of kinship need to be able to bond with someone. We know that parents need to be that person as they grow and get stronger. So let's take a look. Are you ready to parent full time? What do you need to move forward? And what are barriers that may lay ahead? Christina, if you're on there and need to unmute and throw something in, you're welcome to do that too. I put a couple of books here that I think are good. I really liked using this one when I looked at the issues for females, and that's mostly what we will probably be looking at this afternoon, recognizing that as we do this, we have to also remember that we have dads that are on a recovery journey and taking over that parenting role, even if it's not a full-time parent or a co-parent. We don't want to leave them out. but most of the work that you will find is for sober moms. I found this book, which is another good resource, which addresses the dad's side. Issues of recovery. This is generated by the experience I had when I was supervising DCFS and other programs, because they certainly weren't the only outpatient clients that we had in services. But I have also the information that's out there, the research that's out there, the two books I just showed you have a lot of it. Issues of recovery are basic human needs. How can you be a strong parent and stay on your recovery journey and that be the parent that you're supposed to be when you're balancing all these things? And it's tough because you're often coming out with maybe you don't have a driver's license. A job may be difficult, looking at how do you get the basic human needs met? How do you house and nourish and take care of your family? How do you reestablish that parenting role in the appropriate way, especially if you never had it modeled as a parent parenting you? Legal status of the parenting role. Where are you? Is there a legal issue there? Is there something that you're dealing with? Are you involved with CASA? Are you in, not that's not negative. I think it's wonderful. I've done training with them. But it's a balance. And that legal status just puts another pressure on someone that's trying to stay in a recovery role and take care of their recovery. There's safety issues, the safety of relationships you might be in. If it's often difficult to not link back with your old group, and we know that there's a safety issue there. It's on here a couple of times as I went through looking at different things. Safety of the housing environment. If you aren't working, if you haven't had the opportunity to set up appropriate housing and you get into a housing unit, make sure that that housing environment and the environment around that is going to be supportive of our families and of our parents. There's a lot of guilt. A lot of guilt comes into early recovery. So as a parent, how do you balance that? How do you work with that guilt without overcompensating with your children as you take on that parenting role? And I've seen that happen in too many cases. Well, this was so bad. I did this and I did this and I did this. So I want to give them more. I want to give them extra. Exhaustion. Recovery is exhausting. And part of pause is having times when you can't sleep, when you're hyper, when your brain's racing so fast you think you have a little hamster wheel in your brain. There are other times that you just can't get up and function. If you're still having trouble having REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which we need to keep our body and our brain and the way we think and the way we handle things balanced. That's one way we process what's happened during the day and what we're going to do. And if we can't sleep to do that, and that's often true in early recovery, especially as part of pause, that's tough. The loneliness. I don't have my old group I was hanging with. A lot of other people out there still know me as the person that they don't want to associate with, that good old stigma that we're still working on getting rid of, creates a sense of loneliness. Relationship issues. If you're going to date, how do you handle that when you're early in your recovery? What's the best for that? It's often really difficult because you've been lonesome, because you want a healthy relationship, because this person's going to save everything for you. We always say, give it a year or two before you link in with someone. But that so often doesn't happen, as I saw many times. And those relationship issues can really get in the way of that recovery process. And parenting, employment. Even if I find a job, how do I get there? How do I have the clothes to wear? How do I have the food that I need? And how do I get the daycare needs for my children? Daycare in our area, in where we are in our town, especially after the pandemic, so many of them closed and didn't reopen. Daycare is an issue all over this state as I talk with different groups, as I'm in different trainings, as I do some training and personal contact person to person. It's everywhere. And you can't just leave your child to go to work, that you need to work and have that income in order to support your family. This is a balancing act. So we as communities, as providers, as people that are available, we need to help address that. Transportation. If I don't have a license, how do I get around? Even if I have a license, how do I afford a car? How do I afford the insurance? I'm early in recovery because I have to go to my counseling sessions. I may have to go to court. I may have a CASA appointment. I may have a mental health appointment. I may have a substance use disorder appointment. I may be working with my child in 0 to 3 programs or whatever programs are out there. Where do I even have time to get to a job, let alone how do I get there? And then that feeling, some of this comes out of the guilt that I want to be a super mom or a super dad, that tendency to want to overdo. And then finding time for recovery efforts, it's just really, really difficult. So how can we help that? Whatever role you're in, that you may be able to impact that, I encourage you to think about that. And somewhere in there, it's really important in recovery to have some healthy fun. As humans, we need that. But it's difficult to find that time. Balancing relapse and triggers, or triggers and relapse. I should switch that around. Another issue in the parenting role is who's the boss? If my child has been in someone else's care, especially if it's been for quite a while, and suddenly I'm the parent and I'm able to get them back, well, I'm going to be the boss. It's sorting that out. And how do we help parents in early recovery do that, along with the people that were providing that care? I am the parent who had someone come out of treatment and come back home with 3 children. I'm going to share some of that pretty soon. I can remember some of those issues. And they're real. Who's the boss? Self-care. How do I take care of myself? How do I get some downtime? How do I get to my recovery groups? How do I explain to my children in an age-appropriate way why I have to go? Why? Because I'm not using now and I'm new out of recovery, or they're returned home. Do I still have to go to these meetings? They're gone just as much as if they were using, quote, quote. It's a balancing act. And in an hour, I can't give you all the answers, but we can talk about some of the things that can happen. Balancing recovery and parenting responsibilities is what I was just talking about. Being able to appropriately celebrate your recovery journey. Again, part of that's the having fun, getting together with people that make you feel good and that you feel safe. How do you, set boundaries for child behavior? That's tough, especially if you haven't seen it role modeled in your own life experience. How do I get how do I get health care for myself and my child? Just knowing that you have a Medicaid card or that there are some other resources available is not necessarily the answer. It's how do I get there? How do I know what I need done? How do I find a provider? In our area, it can be kind of hard sometimes, even though we have a very strong healthcare center here. And then the big question is, what do I share with my child? How do I talk with my child about what this is about? And this is where a strong, caring person, especially that's got some professional training to do this, can help parents that are in early recovery. How do you share that? There's a lot of good written materials out there, books for children now, and one of them is one I showed earlier, that we can use to help share that with our children, but make sure it's age appropriate and not scary. Make sure that they don't feel like any of this was their fault. And sometimes that's hard for parents to convey. There's two views of parenting on the recovery journey. The parent that's on the recovery journey, and then the parenting partner or child caregiver. This was my husband, and this one was me. There's two sides to it. When you are the partner or caregiver that's been taking care of the children and they come and someone is getting into the recovery, especially if they're coming out of residential, it's kind of like, who are you? You know, they've changed. It's how do I still fit into your life? How can we parent together? I don't know. And then how do I or the caregiver trust you after all the broken promises that were part of your journey? This is why it's so important that families and the caregivers of the children also get some help, not just the person that's experiencing the substance use disorder or mental health and gambling issues, but that's often difficult to do. Another question that they ask themselves as the person that they care about is on their recovery journey. I did all the care and discipline before. Why should I give you the power now? That one was a hard one for me. Even though it was 40 some years ago, I can still remember it because it was like, well, I did all that. Why do you think you can walk in here and suddenly change all the guidelines? It takes somebody that can help. That's where some of those negotiation skills that I said were important in the parenting and early recovery become very important. If you're in a relationship or if you're going to co-parent, even if you're no longer a couple, if you're going to co-parent, what are those negotiations that you need to have so that you know how to handle that appropriately and so that the child feels safe, loved, and cared for, and that the parent on the recovery journey still has strong skills to do that. Even when supporting the recovery journey of a recovering parent, it's difficult to turn over that role. Mine were 8 and 8, so there would be 12, and the other one was about 14. And so I had all those different ranges in there, and it was a lot of different things. It worked out fine. I'm still with him. But it was a hard time, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. It's not just about the parent that's on the early recovery journey, it's the family, however you define family, that's impacted and needs their own recovery journey. So what now? We learn and understand the concept of continuing care. That's really important. Encourage families to do continuing care, whatever your role is. If you're a Ross Council member, if you're somebody from a faith-based community, if you are a super provider or mental health or therapist, help encourage the family to do continuing care. Learn how to talk to the parent about care, such as their abstinence or their medical assisted treatment should they be doing that. It's how do they understand all that, and how do family members that can provide healthy support for a healthy recovery be supportive. It's by educating them and by helping them understand what's going on. Learn how to set guidelines, monitor, and communicate in a non-threatening manner, whether it be the child or whether it be that co-parent. Effective parenting assessments as you're looking at those roles is focus on the child and their needs, because no matter what, in this relationship, their safety, in my opinion, and in many's opinion, has to come first. We have to keep our littles safe. And the more we can support healthy parenting, the more likely we are to do that, though. Allow children to discuss their experiences in whatever your role is. Listen to and record the child's views on the situation so that you know how to respond. It may be something that you can share with the parent if it's just between the two of you. Identify any children who are acting as caregivers for their parents and siblings. If they're taking over that role, they're with their parents are in early recovery, and suddenly they're taking on that parenting role because their parents are so busy doing other things. Help them balance that. And that's often something we see as parents are well into their using, is children becoming those caregivers. Some of the instances that I witnessed when I was supervising outpatient was surprising to even me. And I've been in the field quite a while. We need to treat children, parents, and caregivers as individuals and respect what they have to say and their opinions, and then help them negotiate strong relationships. We also need to make sure parents know they're being listened to. What are their fears? What are their successes? How do we help them celebrate their successes in an appropriate way? We want them to know they're being listened to and appreciated in their recovery journey. I'm going to just skip up here real quick and see if there's any chats that I need to, with the rest of the stuff I'm doing. Lack of daycare, absolutely. Thank you for putting that information in there. The fact that I'm about to lose my voice is making me uneasy. It's vital to build safe and trusting relationships. Again, I've talked about that earlier, so that children and parents can speak out about problems that they have, so that we can help them put resolution to that. We know that there are 3 things that are really important, and this comes out of another program manual that way back when I helped develop, but it was also involves some very important people in our field. And this has never changed. It's important that we can comfort people when they are having problems and things that they're experiencing are frightening and traumatic, even if it's just listening, even if it's just shaking your head and listening, so that they know that they're being heard and there's some comfort in that. Validate it. When we are working with parents and children and caregivers, and they're sharing issues that are frightening or traumatic or that they want some help with, we need to validate that. We don't just need to slough it off. A good example is a child discloses to somebody that their parents screaming and yelling at them a lot. And if that person says, well, I understand that they're under a lot of stress, it'll get better. That's not validating what the child's experience is and helping them understand that they're being listened to. It's important. We aren't going to get past the trauma unless they feel like they're listened to. You may not have a resolution right then, which is the next step, is then how is there some resolution put to that? And oftentimes you will find, and I found with clients that were working their recovery journey and had some frustration when you would talk with them, just the fact that they were able to talk it out and you validated what they were feeling, the pause experience or symptoms that they were showing, those kinds of things, then they could start to put some resolution to it. And they might ask for suggestions that you could do, but you can help guide them to their own resolution, and that creates a healthier recovery. Families are going to suffer setbacks along the way. Obviously, we know with relapse that that's very true. So educating us as communities, as people that impact these families on their recovery journey is really important. We need to let them know and educate. Extended family members, caregivers, friends, and communities need to know how they can support recovery. So ROS being the recovery-oriented systems of care that are in many, many counties in Illinois and will keep growing, provide that. And there are people with lived experience in those programs that are reaching out to the community and to all the areas in the community saying, what can we do? Because we know the more support the communities in every area for housing, for work, for education, for childcare, for fun, for faith, all those things. If we as a group can reach out, we're not going to see near as much relapse. And there's some research that shows that. So based upon the belief that the best place for children to grow up is in a family, which is what the family's first laws and guidelines say, unification, reunification when children are removed is a priority. And I know that's frustrating to a lot of people. How can they put a child back into that situation? Well, if the recovery journey is going well, if that person's serious about what they're doing, it's workable. It happens in a very positive way. One of the children that we had guardianship of went back with dad and bonus mom. It was positive. There was a time I would have said, no way am I giving that child back. But reunification, when it's done right and when there's work on those relationships, can be an extremely positive thing. And we still have a relationship that's very strong. The most effective way to ensure children's safety and permanency is to provide services that engage, involve, strengthen, and support families. And that's so important. We have to remember to bring them in, to offer them services. Key components of a family-centered practice or treatment services, or even, yeah, that's the best terming, is working with the family unit, working toward the well-being of all family members, again, according to how you define family, strengthening the capacity of the families to function on creating solutions. Oh, we're getting close, and I've got some stuff I really want to get to. It's important that we look at that. Helping families learn how to create their own solutions, engaging and empowering, partnering. That's a lot of what ROSCA is about. We also know there can be indications that a parent's not ready to assume the responsibility right away when they first get out of residential or when they're first in treatment services. And some of the things that you may see are not showing up for a scheduled family time. It just becomes overwhelming to them. Or pause may be in there. Oftentimes there's lapses of memory if you're having some symptoms of pause. Forgetting to attend an important event such as a medical appointment. We know oftentimes that people in early recovery, especially parents, they need a little journal. They need to be able to write things down. Don't just count on your cell phone because you may not have the funding to keep it going, and some of those appointments get lost. You may miss some kind of counseling appointment. Write it down. That's one thing you can offer them. Oh, here's a pad of paper and some pencil. Just stick it in your pocket so you don't forget these. If they're ignoring the child during family time, that's a sign that they're not ready to take on that role yet. And we need to do some more parenting skill building. They're reading emails or social media, they're unfocused, or they have unreasonable expectations of the child. Those are things to be looking for as you're getting ready to help these parents resume their role on their recovery journey. Some children can be distressed after family time. Keep an eye on that. And oftentimes there's several reasons. Confusion about the family reunification plan. Children don't know what that's about. There needs to be some kind of explanation so that if they hear some things said, some terminology in their environment that they don't understand, that it's not scary, that they don't want to draw back. There may be feeling guilty about the caregiver at home. Our great-granddaughter didn't want to leave us because then we were going to be alone, which was kind of an interesting, her caring about us as we had cared about her. It ended up being fine. But those are things that we don't often think about. The fact that they may feel guilty because they think they've caused separations. Again, these children cannot think that this substance use disorder is their cause, or not being old enough to even understand reunifying with the parent. So as a grandparent or a kinship caregiver, you need to learn how to explain that as best. And as professionals and people in the caring environment, we can help with that. I want to share these because one way to build a foundation for helping parents assume that role, even if it was never really taken away from them, but yet in their recovery, they're trying to readjust and strengthen their parenting skills. Here's some things that can happen. A life bookbinder is wonderful. I did this just on my own without thinking of the things, without seeing this resource, let me put it that way. Vital papers such as birth certificate, social security card, health records. If you've helped take care of a child while someone is in treatment and you have any of their health records, you need to include that. Let's get back up here. Dates of and notes about psychological or developmental screenings, therapeutic treatment plans, progress notes if they have an IEP in the school system. Parents need to be given a copy of that as they reunify with their children. So this is something that we can help that builds that parenting strength in recovery. And these are things that the parent may not even think about with everything else that's going on in their environment and expectations that are placed on them. This helps. We can provide that role. Records, pictures, including developmental milestones, activities in which the grandchild or kin child was participating, friends' names and contact information. We don't want children that have been separated from their parents and are returning home to parents in early recovery to feel like they're being isolated from their previous, especially if it's a healthy thing. A diary of daily life events, times, dates of family time, if you can. If you have a situation of a co-parent, one parent's in treatment services and is returning to that role of parenting, but yet the kinship caregiver has also been involved with letting them see the other parent, let them know what those events were like, what it was like. Observations made during and after visits is important information when planning. So who needs to be at the table? I think that I found this and I really like this, co-parenting. It's not a competition between two homes, which often it turns into, and I saw that happen many times when we were working with, especially with DCFS clients, because there was a lot of anger toward what happened to, whether it was the father or the mother during that use. And they're no longer a couple. The other parent may have had them during, well, the other, one parent that was in treatment, the other parent may have taken on that role. So I saw a lot of bitterness sometimes. And it just took lots of talking. We were able oftentimes to help resolve that, but it's not an easy task. Co-parenting, it's not a competition between two homes, which they often felt like it was. It's a collaboration of parents doing what's best for the kids. Again, at the end of all of this, to me, it's keeping the kids safe and helping address their trauma as well as that of the parent that's in early recovery. If possible and appropriate, both involvement, whoops, that's too many both involvement of both parents may strengthen a child's journey to go back with a parent or build the parent-child relationship as a recovery process. And this is something that has really helped us through our interaction with parents, rather the children. In the case of our grandchildren, they weren't returned home to mom. We had guardianship till they were 18, but we had a healthy, I won't say necessarily healthy, but we had a good relationship. Even though we retained guardianship, their parent was available and allowed to have interaction with them because we're a family, even if we live in two different homes. And then that became true and still is with our great-grandchild that we had. She's with her dad and bonus mom, and we consider ourselves a family. We interact with each other. We go to birthday parties together. We celebrate holidays as a family so that she doesn't feel like she's pulled in two directions. And I think that's important as we look at recovery processes for parents, that they do that. The other thing I wanted to share, because I've talked about the Ross Councils and my strong belief in them, is this came from the National Institute of Health. And what this basically says is, in looking at how to focus on healthy recovery journeys, is through the Ross Councils, the early times, because ROSC is not just in Illinois. ROSC has been in other states for a lot longer in some areas. We know that it works, and it looks like it's going to be a strong way to help integrate partners and family members where appropriate into healthy recovery and into working with ROSC councils. When we first developed the guidelines for Ross councils here, we said on those committees, we need family members to share what they need and what they feel like the community needs. We need lots of interaction of people actually on their recovery journey. And that's why the Ross councils operate basically with people that have life experience, and it's working wonders. No matter what your role, set realistic and timely goals. Focus on solutions rather than problems. Again, role model solutions so that our parents, as they struggle with some of the issues that I shared earlier, can learn how to handle solutions to their problems. And here's some that oftentimes ROSC council members can step up and help draw in. Younger children are taken to nursery school or to their school, make sure they get there. Older children are not missing school, because if you don't have transportation and you're struggling with trying to balance everything that's going on, or your job is at a time when you can't take your children, these are things that other people can step in and help be a solution rather than a problem. All children receive support with their schoolwork. Is there some way to work that out? That's important if you're a parent in early recovery, that you don't forget how important that is. Children are taken to all necessary medical appointments and checkups, including dental. Do they have a way there if there isn't and the parent is working? Have they signed the necessary papers to allow children to have medical care escorted by somebody else? Now, those things are things you don't think about early on, especially early in recovery. And it's important. And we, whatever our roles are, can help that happen. Education and emotional support can be offered by treatment providers, family services, self-help groups, other professional services, Ross councils, faith-based groups. One thing you may not think of is hospice. They do wonderful groups for grief and loss, especially if there has been an overdose somewhere in there that has impacted that parent and the little. Looking at that is important. There are different things that different hospice groups do that address ways to manage grief and loss, not just death, or the fact that you may be anticipating that coming, which can cause a lot of unease in a relationship. There's Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Gam-Anon, Celebrate Recovery, SMART. You go on and on to the different self-help groups, and many of those may be supported through faith-based groups or other community organizations that are offering some kind of quote recovery unquote support. And I think that it's 1 minute till, and it pretty much wraps up what I've got to share. But these are resources. This Everything Changes is a wonderful book that gives you some hints if you're working with parents in early recovery. Can't beat Jerry's book. We do and provided training for Celebrating Families. There's several teams around the state that do that. We're offering training on the program, children's program kit. There'll be more coming out, and you can all get notices on that. These are just different things that are important. Confident Parent in Recovery, great resource. It's about 30 snippets of people that are now professionally in this field that are in recovery and sharing different tips on how to create a healthy parenting relationship early in recovery. This is another good one where a mother wrote letters to her son who was using, and that helped her uh, help him. There's just lots of resources out there. I will tell you that there should be, is the survey on there, Zach? Yeah, there'll be a survey pop up when we close this. I am willing to, well, I already sent it to Zach. He can forward these when he sends it. He'll be sending out certificates for your CEUs. Oh, I hope my glasses haven't been glaring the whole time. They probably have. I really appreciate all of you that are working with parents that are early in their recovery, with you that are working in kinship care roles. And there are no magic answers, but there's a lot of things to be aware of. And we as a group, as a team throughout this state of Illinois, can start building on those and create some potential solutions for some of the things I mentioned. If it triggers your thinking so that you're going, oh yeah, I can address this way. I can help this person with this. I hope that you can build on that. And I thank you for what you do, because I've been there. And sometimes I miss that direct service if that's what you're doing. But I've been there, and I know it's not an easy trip, but I know it's one I wouldn't trade for anything. So I'm going to tell you all goodbye. And Zach, any comments? Anything that came up?
Nope, everything's all good.
Okay. See you next time, guys.
See ya.
Well,